Andrews, and I am the co-chair of Durham Bee City USA, and I'm also a resident of Old North Durham. And I'm going to talk today about pollinators and native plants and healthy habitats. And I'm also going to talk about how you can begin to create healthy habitat for pollinators in your own space. I'm here at the house that my partner and I bought 10 years ago, and we are close to downtown. We're on a neighborhood street and on the corner of a busier road. And we've spent the past 10 years trying to create a habitat that is healthy for pollinators. Why? Because the work pollinators do is so important to healthy natural ecosystems and to human health. Pollinators have been declining for over 50 years, especially because of habitat loss and pesticide use. I have two signs right here that tell everybody what we're doing in this space. One is that we are creating habitat. It's a wildlife habitat. And two, that we don't use pesticides. So right there, we are doing two things that will really help pollinators thrive and flourish. Okay, so what is a pollinator? A pollinator is a bee, a bat, a wasp, a moth, a hummingbird, a butterfly, a beetle, a fly that helps a plant to reproduce by moving pollen from one plant to another. So pollination is reproduction. Some plants, like corn or wheat or rice or pine trees, are pollinated by the wind. But some plants need help to get their pollen from one plant to another. So every plant produces a flower, and in the flower is pollen, which is like the sperm of the flower or of the plant, and every flower also has an ovary. So what a pollinator does is it is searching for nectar, which is their food, and it will land on a flower, and the pollen will brush against its body, and then when it goes to another flower, that pollen will move and fall onto the other flower. So the pollinator, the bee or the fly or the wasp or whatever it is moving the pollen from plant to plant so that it produces a seed. And the seed is often found inside a fruit or a vegetable, and that seed is what allows the plant to reproduce and to make another plant. So when you see bees zipping from plant to plant, they're doing two things. They're doing search for food, search for nectar, or moving pollen from plant to plant to plant so that the plant can reproduce. When we think of pollinators, a lot of times we think of honeybees. But honeybees are actually not native to North America. They were brought over with European colonists. Honeybees are more like a farm worker. They're managed and they are transported to big agricultural crops like cranberries and blueberries and almonds. Beyond the big agricultural farms, in nature and in home gardens, most of the pollinators are native bees. There are over 4,000 species of native bees, and these are bumblebees, carpenter bees, sweat bees, digger bees, and these are all of the bees that do most of the work of pollinating in my garden. Honeybees pollinate my tomatoes. So having those native bees in my yard is a really important way for me to get fruits and vegetables. So I try to make sure that I'm providing nourishment for native bees all throughout the warm season. In the spring, instead of planting grass, I plant clover because that's the first nutritious food that a bee needs when it comes out of its sort of hibernation over winter. Clover provides lots of nutrition. In the spring, there's lots of flowering trees. There's peaches, cherries, mulberries, that the bees are able to get a lot of nutritious food from. In the summer, I like to try to plant zinnias. I have a plant called St. John's wort, which is a native plant. It's not blooming now, but in June, this plant is full of yellow little puffball flowers, and the native bees love it. They cannot get enough of it. So I try to make sure that I have a lot of nutritious food for the bees during these times. Another native plant that I have is called the American beautyberry, and in the spring this shrub is covered with white flowers that the bumblebees and the honeybees and the wasps and the butterflies love. They love it. They come and they swarm the shrub and they pollinate the flowers, and then because the flowers have been pollinated, it produces this berry. Well, the birds love the berry. These green berries are all going to turn white if the birds let them stick around that long. And then the birds are going to eat the nutritious berry. And then the birds are going to go poop the berry seeds out in different places. And then that's how the plant reproduces. That's how the plant survives. So I love an American beautyberry because it supports a lot of different species. So in the summer, I also try to plant zinnias, and these are called Mexican sunflowers because the pollinators love those flowers a lot. And while they're at those flowers, I'm hoping they'll make a stop on my tomatoes and on my cucumbers and on my zucchini so that I get a little bit of nutritious food as well. In the fall, I try to provide goldenrod, asters, and sunflowers to give lots of nutrition to the pollinators before they have to hibernate during the winter. So all year long during the warm times, I try to provide in this yard nutritious native plants that keep the pollinators healthy. The partnership between pollinators and plants has gone on for thousands of years. In fact, some pollinators have co-evolved with plants, and they have what are called host plants. And an example of a host plant is a milkweed plant. And this is a milkweed right here. This is called a common milkweed. This is another kind of milkweed that's called swamp milkweed. They're the host plant for a monarch butterfly, and those are the big orange butterflies that you occasionally see. Monarch butterflies migrate from Mexico all the way through North America up to Canada every year, and then they return. It's this enormous journey. But recently, because of habitat loss and pesticide use, the host plant, the milkweed, has disappeared. We've lost almost 90% of our milkweed population. And scientists are worried that pretty soon monarch butterflies will become extinct because of the loss of habitat, because of the loss of their milkweed host plant. So there's a real effort to replant milkweed to try to support monarch butterflies, because a milkweed is the only plant that a monarch can lay its eggs on. So a monarch will lay its eggs on these leaves, and then the eggs will turn into caterpillars, and the caterpillars chew on the leaves for their nutrition. And without the milkweed, the monarchs can't do that. So the way that the milkweed is pollinated is in the spring, there's usually a big puffy pink flower up here, and the bees love it. Again, it's a native plant that pollinators love. They pollinate the plant. The flower then becomes these seed pods. You can see them right here. And inside this seed pod are thousands and thousands of tiny little seeds that have little pieces of what's called fluff attached to it. And pretty soon this seed pod's going to open up when the time is just right. And those little tiny seeds with the fluff are going to go out like umbrellas, and the wind is going to carry them away. And they're going to land on the ground, and they're going to wait till next spring, and they're going to make new plants. So a host plant is really, really important to monarch butterflies, and the way the host plant continues to reproduce is through pollination. Diversity is so important to a healthy ecosystem because diversity keeps plants and people resistant to disease and illness. And a diverse ecosystem also creates some nutritious food for me as well. So when I provide nutritious food for pollinators, I am also helping to participate and get the rewards of a healthy ecosystem. So if you're ready to start creating a pollinator-friendly habitat in your space or even in containers, the easiest and cheapest way to do that is to imitate nature. And that's by collecting and spreading seeds, because that's what nature does. So for example, this is a plant called ironweed, and you can still see here there's a little bit of the purple bloom that's on the flower, but a lot of this plant has already passed its bloom and has been pollinated, and it's producing all of these little seed pods. So what I'm doing in this yard is I collect those seeds, and wherever I want more of the ironweed, I'll go and I'll just spread the seeds. I'll do what the plant would do, which is drop the seeds, and maybe the wind would blow them around. They will lie on the ground and wait all winter, and next spring I'll have, possibly, if all the conditions are correct, a few new ironweed plants. So collecting and spreading seeds and just kind of noticing how nature spreads seeds is one really good way to start your own pollinator-friendly habitat. Plants produce thousands and thousands of seeds, because out of all those thousands of seeds, probably only a handful will create a new plant. So that's why you see so many seed pods here. And then other ways to get plants is you could ask other gardeners. Gardeners love to share plants. I have a lot of plants that I got in my gardens that came to me from friends, and I love to walk around my yard and I can look at a plant and think of the person that shared that plant with me. So you can always ask gardeners. We love to share plants, and the fall is a really good time to do that. You could also purchase plants. You could go to a nursery and try to find native plants, but be sure if you do purchase plants that you're getting native plants. There's a lot of really pretty plants at local nurseries that aren't native, and although they're fun to look at and they're beautiful, they're not providing a lot of nutrition for pollinators. And so that's the real key thing, is that native plants provide the nutrition that pollinators need to survive. Thanks for visiting with me in my garden. I hope it was helpful and that you learned some things about pollinators and native plants and how to start your own space in Durham to help create healthy ecosystems. Thanks. Bye. Next to the milkweed, I have another plant that pollinators really love, and it's called the Joe Pye weed. Why is it that the plants that pollinators love the most are called weeds? What is that all about?